Shawn Baptist has been praying for you, Steve, for a long while.
Yeah.
And on Sunday mornings, at least one Sunday a month, we put towards you and your church. And so we're grateful for the opportunity to kind of introduce you to our church and to the watching world in COVID as they tune in here. And so, Steve, thank you for joining me and Mark today.
Thank you very much. It's my honor.
And if you wouldn't mind, if you would just give us kind of a Reader's Digest brief couple-minute version of you and your family's bio and how you got to London.
Well, my name's Steve Messersmith. I'm married to my wife of 30 years, Lisa, and we have 6 children. And our oldest is getting married a week from Friday.
Wow.
And so we're excited about that. And my hope is that I just don't cry as I give the bride away. So our youngest is 11. We've got 4 boys and 2 girls. We have been serving the Lord in England for the last just a little over 17 years. We came in 2003, and we by God's grace, we actually visited this church about 3 months into when we first came to England back in 2003, and visited on a Sunday afternoon. Just was praying and looking as to where God would maybe have us stay for a while and then go from there. We came as church planting missionaries, but didn't know more than that we felt God called us to London. And then we're just looking and waiting. And so the church was very small. The Sunday afternoon service had 7 people. When we entered the room, the average age dropped to about 65. I mean, most of them were in their late 70s, 80s, that kind of thing. But the teaching was good. The fellowship was sweet, and we had no other place to sit and to be. So the following Sunday, I brought my family, and we only had the 3 kids then, and we just started attending. And after about 5 weeks, the pastor, Morris Buller, who was just a brilliant teacher and just loved God so much, he just sat me down. He said, "Look, I know that a lot of you Americans come," and this is what he said, "but you guys don't stay very long." He said, "What would you think about just becoming the church evangelist, and let's see what God does?" And so we did that for just less than a year. And after a year, we moved up north for 3 years and worked with a group of men there, establishing some churches and working in a small village. A year after that, so about 4 years on from first coming to England, we're now up north. The church here no longer has a pastor. Morris had retired, and they were looking for a minister and gave us a call and asked if we would consider coming back to serve the Lord here as the pastor and his family. And we always thought God wanted us here. And when I was here in 2003, I would walk around Chiswick and I would just think, man, I feel God has called us to this place, but I can't go in and say, "You out me in." That's not right. You wait on the Lord. And so in the Lord's timing, God brought us back to Chiswick. And so in 2008, we came, and I was inducted in April of that year as the minister of the church here, and have been serving here ever since. And we feel that this is probably the ministry that he has for us. And if it's by his grace, we will stay here until the work that he's called us to do is finished. And we're hoping that is maybe, honestly, another 15 to 20 years. But that's in the Lord's hands.
Praise God. So I thought this was interesting, and I'm sure people who are watching this would be interested in hearing a little bit about the church itself and the history of it, with one particular mention of one particular historical figure that comes into play.
Yeah, that I'm the pastor here, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Right. Exactly.
So the church here has been on this very spot since about 1877. The 10 years prior to that, the church was established in 1866. There was just a handful of Baptist believers that used to gather down at the local congregational church because they hired a room out. And a kind of semi-known minister named Charles Haddon Spurgeon heard about them, and they got
heard
connected.
that guy.
Yeah, I don't know, something like the Prince of Preachers or something like that. But he connected up with the church here, that handful, about a dozen people. He established them as a church. They wrote their constitution. The Metropolitan Tabernacle bought the very piece of property that our church is on, sold it back to that group of people at cost. For the first 10 years, as they were using different facilities and everything, the Met Tab, Spurgeon's college, would send young preacher men each Sunday to preach to the congregation here. So really, this church was established and founded and nurtured by Charles Spurgeon and the Met Tab and Spurgeon's College. When this building, and I believe this is the third building on this premise, Mark, the building you've seen and been
Sure.
in, it was finished in 1897, and Charles's two sons set the cornerstones, and Charles and Thomas, they also preached here for the inaugural service. One of the sons preached in the morning from this pulpit. The other son did a community service where all the churches in the area gathered together, and he led that service. So our church, our constitution, pretty much everything has Spurgeon and Met Tab written all over it.
That's awesome. One of the things I love about looking at the history of your local church, to be distinguished from the history of church, the church history, is because whenever it almost invariably, when you go back to the beginning, as cool as it is that Spurgeon was a key figure in that, but that the vision was to reach Chiswick, to put a gospel work in Chiswick. And even though that vision is over 100 years old, that vision is still maintained today in the ongoing ministry of the church. So tell us a little bit maybe then about what the church looks like today.
Well, the church today is I call it a very typical London church, but it is a very typical kind of non-British London church. So there are some churches here in London that are more on the English kind of makeup of the church. Our church, as far as its makeup, we have about 20 plus different nationalities or cultures that attend the service, and English or British would probably be the least out of all of them. So we're, a very multicultural church. Our background is, Africa, Middle East, America, the South Americas. We're just from all over the place. And so we're very eclectic, I think, in our worship style and in our outreach and the way that our church feels. It's made up of everybody's culture and feeling and passion. All of that kind of comes together and just makes a chili pot, a chili pot for Jesus, really. It's all in there, but it comes out in a beautiful mix. And our church is quite young. We're not large by any means. We're probably a smallish or middle-sized, smallish type church. We have, when we're able to meet together without Rona affecting what we're doing, we have about 70-ish folks that attend on a Sunday morning.
Which, by the way, by American standards might be small, but for UK standards, that's actually medium-sized church.
It is a medium-sized church for UK standards. And the Lord is just blessing. I mean, when we first came, there was about 20 including my family of 5. And, we've had ups and downs and battles and blessings over the years that we've been here. And I believe that we're just now in the place over the last 4 or 5 years that God has positioned things where we're growing, we're healthy, and we're having an outward vision of reaching our community. And though I said that our British makeup is the least, in the past we had very few people come from Chiswick. Most of our people came from outside of the area, but now the Chiswick side of people coming in is growing. And
praise God.
And so when we were able to open up the doors for somewhat of a kind of non-worship service, people are attending, but we can't sing, we can't do anything of that nature. They can sit and watch me do the live stream. And so most of the people coming, somewhere between 15 or 20, are mostly local people. And that's been a blessing.
So tell us then, that's a great way to help transition, to help us understand what is sort of the spiritual condition of Chiswick or that area of London, or maybe generally London, however you feel like that it would help us best to understand that. And just, just what do you feel the sense of that area is, and kind of Christianity, religion, openness to the gospel, that sort of thing?
Well, this is my take on it. I don't think so. When we first came, we did a little bit of a survey trip, and man, I preached all over the country of the United States. England is dead, and there's so little gospel message being preached there, and it's just horrible. And I wouldn't say that now. What I would say is it's typical. It's typical of most people don't want Jesus. They want their stuff. They've got some money, or it's just normal. They don't think about God. But there are some amazing gospel-minded churches and ministers and people within the UK, within London. I have a sister church just right up the street. They are just wonderful. They're pretty predominantly British, and they think we're wild, but we love each other, and we get together during the year, and we have services together, and we ministers preach at each other's churches. So I think the spiritual condition is this: there are people who need Jesus, period. And they're not coming to the doors of the church. It used to be that when people had problems, they would seek the minister. They would seek out the church. They would seek out that. They don't do that. They seek other means nowadays. So the spiritual condition of the church is probably really similar to the States, maybe, in that, you know what? Everywhere you go, there's someone that needs Christ, and they're not looking for Jesus. They're not thinking about Jesus. So they need someone to go knock on their heart's door to let them know. And what we're trying to do is most British people, most London people are too busy in their life to think about spiritual things. And so that's the spiritual condition. They've got football, and they've got shopping, and they've got all their other stuff in life going on, and they just don't think about the Lord. And I think that's been the greatest evangelistic tool of Satan, is to busy up people's lives and make them so crazy that they never think about Jesus anymore. And so we're just trying to be a church that's a light up on the hill, to say that we're here, but they won't walk to the light. So we got to figure a way to take the light to them.
Any unique challenges that you feel that, from an American standard coming to London, that would be unique?
Yeah, being an American, that's the challenge. Honestly, it is, because in the 17 years that I've been here, I've heard from every place that I've ministered, which has only been 3, twice here and 1 up north, every time I'd go somewhere or be somewhere, the question was, are you going to stay? And the challenge is that it's hard in Britain in the sense that, it takes time. We're now here 12 years, and we're just now to the point where I feel like we got some momentum with the Lord in that we're moving forward. It takes time, but the average missionary, I think the IMB standard, I think the longest long-term missionary here was 8 years. I just started really getting to know the church after about 4 or 5. It just takes time. And I think the unique challenge for Americans is that we have the persona from, we have the people think of us as you come and you go. That's what Morris said to me. You Americans don't stay. And he was dead on right. And that, I think, is the big trick. So we had, about 1.5 years ago, we had a small church in Chelsea, not too far from where we're at. For whatever reasons, they closed down. And about 7 or 8 of them from that church eventually, not all at one time, but eventually showed up here. And so I had a meeting with them, and their one question for me was this: are you going to leave us too? So I think the key to reaching Britain is having local churches that stay the course, that are supported and strengthened by partnerships that do long-term or long-termish vision, because the quick and easy doesn't usually produce fruit. It's the seeding and the planting, the watering, the nurturing that produces fruit. So I hope, Shawn, that answers your question.
It does.
But I think that, for me, is the biggest challenge. Because once they think they have your heart that is there, then they'll begin to trust you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an excellent segue. The next question: what does gospel partnership look like in your estimation? Especially for a church like ours.
Yeah. Well, so we have had gospel partnerships with churches in America. Our first partnership started, I don't know, maybe about 3 years ago. And that church in Georgia. And what gospel partnership looks like to me is it's life-saving. Ministry's hard. And when you're the sole pastor and you have no staff, and your staff assistant's your wife, and your janitor assistant is your wife, and your Sunday school assistant is your wife, and you get the point. It's hard and it's heavy. And about 4 years ago, I had decided to quit. I was done, and I was ready to give up. And if it hadn't been for a partnership where they prayed not just for us, but with us, they showed up a few times a year over a couple of years. And they not only said, let's go do door knocking, or let's street preach, or let's do ministry out there. They ministered to us. And I think partnerships have got to be twofold. They have to be for the strengthening of that local church and its minister, and to have a vision and for the outreach of the community. Because I think the best part of the partnership is that you bring new life, you bring excited vision, and you bring companionship as well. And I think those are important, not just sending me 2 groups of 5 teenagers or college and career people and say, hey, Steve, we're here to be a blessing to you. Go manage them. Because I'm still managing our church and our outreaches and that. Yeah. And so to me, partnership looks like an extension of our church, but y'all just in Kentucky, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're super excited about what this is going to look like for us over the next years, honestly, as we explore further what partnership between our two churches looks like. I mean, we kind of explored a little bit. We talked with Carl Porter in another interview about his part in sort of coming on at Chiswick and being in many ways a liaison to help you continue to do what you do, so that churches like us can come alongside and you don't have to feel like you have to manage all those things, as you were saying. So it's been incredible to see what God is doing providentially with Chiswick Baptist Church, has been working up to, and will continue to in the future. And we're excited about what that looks like.
And so are we, actually.
Well, and I think that this, and we talked, I think, a little bit, we've talked to Carl so long ago now that I've forgotten, but how God has actually worked through this about the time that previous staff member Travis and I came, kind of very similar. The first trip, Steve, was I left there thinking, gosh, there's no gospel work in London. And then going back in the fall of the same year with the Georgia church and a couple others, and then meeting all these other gospel partners, it's like, oh no, they're there. And then I left excited because there are faithful pastors, churches, church planners, gospel organizations that are doing a great work, faithful work, and really walking away from saying, this is, I think it's I think it's a Mark Dever quote. People often overestimate what they can do in a short time and underestimate what they can do in a long time. And I think that specifically in London, we as American Christians want to come in with our gospel guns, boom, 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 boom. Let's go do this and let's shoot this activity over here and do this and boom, 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 and fast. And we want results fast. But I think that having that partnership, or having a church and a pastor understand its long-term growth. But for us, and when I began looking for partners, that's really what we've been looking for, praying for, is a partner that we can invest in long-term, so that we can know you, we can know your church members, we can find out what we can pray for you about when we come, that we already know, hey, these are the things that Chiswick's already trying to accomplish in these areas, and we want to just support. And I know that Mark does a good job of saying that even if we're the grunt people behind the scenes, so that Chiswick Baptist people can be the frontline people meeting the people in the neighborhood. We just want long-term relationships that's good, that hopefully strengthens Chiswick Baptist and then fulfills the Great Commission, reaching people, potentially even starting new churches, just like the beginning of Chiswick Baptist is, in the distant future, where there's growth and opportunity as God gives it. And so I'm just thankful for you and your endurance as a pastor there, and your family, and excited about what God is doing, bringing Carl along, the opportunities for us, and of course we'll have to see how, as you put it, the Rona affects our thing, our trips, but we hope that, and let me just say this also, that you all are a blessing to us, and that we can learn from you, because we know that there's a lot of things that we can learn from and be encouraged. Discipleship is a two-way street, and so we look forward to seeing how our church is blessed by Chiswick Baptist as well. And actually, if anything, one of the wonderful things that I always like, just because of where we're located, the demographic of our area, I long to worship in a church like yours that looks a little bit more like heaven, where there's people from every tribe, tongues, and nations worshiping together on a Sunday. And
dude, it's powerful, man. It really is. And I think the greatest aspect of partnership is what rubs off on each other by both sides. Mark, I don't know if he knows this, but from the very first time he came here, he just sang with our worship team. I think you helped lead worship that day, Mark, and you played your guitar and stuff. But from that one, and then the next time you came over, you influenced my wife. You gave her a book to read that it just changed everything. You gave some information, and I think you brought the books with you, actually, if I remember correctly. It changed our worship team. It therefore changed our worship, and it changed our church as we worshiped.
Praise God.
That is what
Praise God. Yep.
And we're so thankful to you both and to your church, and I look forward to what God's going to do in the future.
Absolutely. Well, Steve, thanks for joining us today. Those of you who are watching this interview, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for more of these kinds of conversations as we look to see what God is going to do with people, both from Hebron Baptist and from Chiswick Baptist, to reach both of those locations for for Christ. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you all later.